entry, and distinguishing value scales. Average the ratings that produce an overall rating for each competency for each scale. And then finally take average ratings and identify which competencies are critical for the job based on importance and need entry. So for determining cutoffs, the cutoffs need to be determined for each of the scales. The recommended cutoffs are 3.0 or above for importance and 2.0 or below at need entry. Competencies averaging to meet those cutoffs are considered critical for the job. And then these can be then used to help decide which competencies will be included in the assessment process. And then this is another example of a job analysis worksheet for competencies. It's a little bit similar to the one we just saw, and this one's importance scale, need an entry scale, distinguishing value scale, and they're each 1 through 5 on either end, and then right in the center, 1 through 4, and they both have important questions that are asked prior to rating. So for the importance scale, you want to ask the question, how important is the competency for effective job performance? And then this scale goes from 1 to 5, not important, somewhat important, important, very important, and then finally extremely important for number 5. So need an entry scale. So for this one, you want to ask the question, when is this competency needed for effective job performance? And this scale rating goes from 1 to 4, need the first day, must be acquired within the first 3 months, must be acquired within the first 4 to 6 months, and then finally 4, which is must be acquired after the first 6 months. So, distinguishing the value scale, and then this question would be, how valuable is the competency for distinguishing superior from barely acceptable employees? 1 through 5, not valuable, somewhat valuable, valuable, very valuable, and then extremely valuable. And then this would be what the bottom of the page looks like. So, like I said, similar to the other one, this one lists competency, rating, source, importance, need at entry, and then distinguishing value. And then again, it has at the bottom of that, it's the signature, title, and then the date of when this was rated. So step 6 is going to be the task and competency linkages. So you want to use the job analysis worksheet for the tasks and competency linkages. In the task column, write the numbers of the tasks that were identified as critical that you found in the first step. Write the competency numbers of the critical competencies from step 5 across the top row. And then to continue that, each subject matter expert will work on their own to rate the importance for effective task performance for each competency, and then eliminate only any tasks that limit to 1 or more competencies, and only competencies that are not linked to at least 1 task. And then for step 7 and 8, of the competencies remaining at the end of step 6, you want to eliminate competencies that cannot be reasonably assessed with a rating scale. Then remaining competencies will later on be considered for assessment. Next, you will determine which competencies will be used as selective and quality ranking factors, and then you just want to note that factors must be documented. So the job analysis worksheet for task and competency linkages, this is an example of what would be at the top of the page, so it's the linkage scale, and here you're asking how important is the competency for effective task performance. And this goes 1 through 5, 1 not important, through 5, which is extremely important. And then, once again, very similar to the rest of them, it has 2 columns this time, and it's a task on one end, and then on the right side it's the competencies. And then at the bottom of that, it is the signature, title, and the date. So for the new and you, how I apply this to my life, I'm actually a marketing major, so over the summer I interviewed for an internship at a company called Witham Smith & Brown, which is an accounting firm. And I actually ended up getting the internship. I never personally used these worksheets prior, but I know that after I went in again and actually got the job, they used these worksheets to actually hire me. So now
Alright. Hi, I'm Steve. So I'm going to be talking to you guys about how job accomplishments are going to apply to a job analysis. So just a few key points to start off. We're going to be looking at what will help convince interviewers, through our accomplishments, and also how can a job analyst or somebody applying for a job quantify and qualify accomplishments into the selection process. So, what is an accomplishment? An accomplishment is a job accomplishment is going to be like a specific experience. They have variable levels of effort, difficulty, and accolades received, obviously. So, like an accomplishment can be anything as long as it's relevant to the job that you're going to be applying for. So, accomplishments can be broken down into a few specific criteria. Did you enjoy the experience? Did you do it well? Did you gain some sort of satisfaction from it? And was it like a source of personal pride for you? Are you proud of the work that you accomplished? So there's two main methods of really amplifying an accomplishment. Those are going to be quantifications and superlatives. Quantifications are assessing like a numerical value to highlight something, whereas superlatives are just phrases that are meant to set your accomplishment apart from other similar accomplishments. So some examples of quantification. Maybe you increased sales by X% over the course of Y months. Or maybe you added X amount of new accounts in a period of time. Or you moved X dollars of inventory. Or you managed a staff of X employees. So for superlatives, when you're describing things that you did, you're going to be wanting to use words such as like first, only, best, most, top, highest. So just like general stuff, like like in your yearbook, that kind of stuff. So for job accomplishments, there's some benefits of quantifications and superlatives. So just to kind of reiterate, quantifications are measurable ways to judge accomplishments, and superlatives differentiate you from the competition. So, what are employers looking for? That's the golden question, right? So, luckily, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, NACE, does a yearly survey of what attributes employers are looking for on resumes. So their top attributes from their most recent survey, 79.8% of employers were looking for teamwork ability, 77.2% were looking for leadership qualities, 75.6% were looking for writing skills, 74 were looking for problem solving, and 73 were looking for a strong work ethic. So, how might this apply to a job application? So, like hypothetically, if a company favored these attributes, how might they select employees based on accomplishments? All right. So, teamwork. How well you work with others. So, maybe for example, your team successfully completed last quarter's project goal faster than any other team in the company. Maybe you're like my boy Archie, and you set up that game-winning assist. Nova Nation. So for job leaderships, how are you better suited to lead than others? Maybe you successfully managed a team of over 20 employees as a supervisor. I'm not going to talk about the Flyers. It was a really bad game last night. So I'm sorry, G. I love you, but it was rough. So written communication skills. What makes you such a good writer? So maybe you spent a period of time as a contributor for an online periodical. Maybe you won an essay contest. You came in first place, or you could just kind of, use good grammar on your resume too. That always works. So for problem-solving skills, how do you create solutions in the workplace? Maybe you performed a cost analysis on product X and identified areas where your company could save money, and through that you were able to achieve maybe like the highest profit on a specific product in your industry. So for strong work ethic, how do you work harder than your contemporaries? Maybe you haven't called out of work in over 2 years. Maybe you met all the sales goals for the previous 6 periods. Or maybe you're like Cal Ripken and you played 2,632 consecutive games of baseball. So accomplishments can be related to specific competencies, and I'm going to be going through 3 hypothetical competencies and how they could be related to accomplishments. It's going to be like speaking another language, maybe you're becoming certified in a trade, or understanding how to use a specific program like this. So an auto manufacturer, maybe they're looking for somebody to work on their production line, and they are looking for proficiency in production software. So maybe you could list on your resume, I used SAP to organize a production line for over 10 years. Second example, maybe you're the lead social worker for a large school district with a significant Spanish-speaking population. So the district's going to be looking for somebody who's bilingual in English and Spanish. So on your resume you could list, I've got a full professional proficiency in Spanish, and I've been working with about 35% Spanish-speaking clients, in my time as a social worker. So third example, a construction company is hiring a new electrician. So electricians are required to meet specific requirements at a state level as well as with the National Electrical Code. So maybe this guy is, he's been registered as a master electrician with the NEC for the past 15 years. So for my new and you, I did a sales data analysis at work. I worked for the Barnes & Noble on campus, and I checked weekend sales data, and we analyzed some places where we realized some places where we weren't making money, and we adjusted our hours accordingly. And that's something personally I'm pretty proud of, because it's something that made an impact. So I have it listed on my resume as an accomplishment. Thank you.
How's everyone doing today? I'm going to be talking about rating scales, which Ashley kind of touched on. So rating scales are often rated using two criteria, the frequency and importance. And with the job analysis, that's what's going in. The evaluations, what's coming back to you. It's kind of the result. So with frequency, it's how often a task is performed, and that obviously leads you to how important it is. So when you're looking at your job, you want to know really what your priorities are and what makes it important in that way. Which brings us to importance, which is how important a task is to performing a job. So when you're looking at your goals or what you want to accomplish, you want to see how important that task is and how integral it is to get it accomplished. So for that, we use a task frequency scale, which will indicate how often you perform that task as a part of the job. So it's really just taking the information we know and putting it in scale form. And it'll help you determine what resources need to be allocated where. So here's an example of that. This is for nursing. This is kind of more complicated, but it's the same idea. There's stuff on there like you have to work through breaks, stress, how often, and then also there's the task importance scale, which indicates how important the task is to completing the job. And it helps you determine your course of action to accomplishing that task. So doing that lists is something that helps a lot, because you have on paper what you need to accomplish, and it can help you achieve those goals, as we've mentioned before, because that's ultimately what you want done. You don't want to get too caught up in the particulars of the task, and you really have to prioritize all of those things, because there's only so many hours you're going to get in a day. So this is a competency rating scale. This is really before you get the job, what's needed. This is for the guy hiring more than the guy assessing. So this is an example of that. This is kind of straightforward, scale of 1 to 5, and on 100 right next to it. And all of these scales are often rated using three criteria. Again, importance, how important that competency is going to be, which will determine your workload, and the distinguishing value of that, how valuable that task or competency is, to distinguish it superior from the barely acceptable performance, because even though they're getting the job